All right, welcome into today's show. I'm joined by one of the pit masters of Rooters-N-Tooters, Mr. Paul Keltner. They are out of Mount Pleasant, Tennessee, which is about an hour south of Nashville. Paul, thanks for joining us on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kurt. I always enjoy talking barbecue anytime.
I love it. Well, that makes two of us. And just to give our listeners some context, so I got connected to Paul through a class, actually. I took a KCBS class back in January of 2022, and Paul and his wife Lynn taught the pork version or the pork category for that class, and it was fun stuff. A lot of great cooks, a lot of good memories made, and so we find ourselves here on the show. And Paul and I have run into one another occasionally at several events, since we are both in the southeastern region. So, Paul, one thing I always like to start with is the journey. This barbecue journey is something that's very fascinating to me. Met a lot, as you have, I'm sure, met a lot of great people just in the short year we've been doing it. But I'd love to chat about journey, and specifically, your journey and Lynn's journey into this craziness of competitive barbecue. How did all this start?
I think like a lot of anybody who kind of gets into anything culinary, that starts pretty young. And I'm no exception to that. I've always enjoyed being around cooking. My grandmother caught me when I was like 6 years old, standing in a chair in an oven trying to cook eggs. The stove wasn't on, thankfully, but I seen her do it, trying to mimic her do it, try and cook breakfast for everybody. But that just carried on as I got older. I was helping the family, cooking with just busy parents and just trying to help them out and being asked to do that. And anytime we went anywhere, I kind of was the person that got picked to cook if there was cooking to be done. So I just always had that in the background. Even thought about going a culinary route when I was in school. But when you start looking at this was before chefs were cool like they are now. This was back when it was more of a line cook and you didn't have a clue who was back there preparing your food. But once you start looking at the hours and the stress, and that's just kind of a route I just decided not to go. And it ultimately ended up, it was huge in sports when I was young, and still even did it all the way into probably my late 30s, was always doing some kind of sports. Well, I ended up running into a friend of mine whose brother was a chef, and he actually cooked in a contest. Their first contest was talking about how great it was, and they ended up winning it. It was one of the Jim Evans series that was a few years back. They don't do it anymore, but and got huge barrel heads and all these trophies and stuff in their first time out. And he was talking about how much he liked it, and he was like, "Hey, you like to cook," and I cook for him a lot too, and on some of our trips. And he said, "You ought to look into it." And so, lo and behold, we just got to researching it a little bit, and I'm a child of barbecue pit masters. So, watching that show, it came on about that time. This would have been about 2010. And so I said, "Hey, I'd like to try this and do this," and got to researching some ugly drum smokers and made my own drum smokers for just a little bit of nothing. I just scrapped around, got some barrels, cleaned them up, and went to Walmart and bought the cheapest grates I could find and made my own little fire basket at the house, and literally used back when they used to age a little bit. Back when they used to put telephone books in the mailbox, on the front of them had little magnets, and I would take those little magnets and use those as my draft holes over my, because I didn't have any experience on actually putting little valves and all that stuff. This was really an ugly drum smoker, and this was back before fast and back before gateways and all that kind of thing. And it was me and a couple other guys. We kind of knew each other, and we were on different teams, but we kind of had the same concept. And we'd be sitting up all night long, smoking meat on these drums. But and my wife really liked it. She got into it. She's the competitive person on this whole deal. She's the one pushing to do all the contests more so than me. But I enjoy them just as well. But it's something for us both to do. Whereas before, a lot of times, a lot of activities was either just me or just her, not too much together. And so that's what really got into it through a friend, and loved the atmosphere and loved it being able to do it with my wife. And I don't ever really see me stopping doing it, whether it's KCBS or some other circuit. I will continue doing it forever, as far as I'm concerned.
Now, you guys have really grabbed the bull by the horns here too, and you're competing at a high level. You're competing a lot. I think might be pushing maybe 40 competitions ish this year.
We will for sure. Yeah, we'll hit that 40 mark. It wouldn't surprise me if we do.
So you talked about as a young child getting into it. One of the things I've found from pretty much all of our guests on the show is that's exactly how all of this started. It kind of lit a fire, no pun intended, inside of them and created that passion around it. And to your point, you are a competitive person. I know Lynn's really competitive as well. So that's certainly, influenced you guys to get into this world. You talked about the taking the magnets off the yellow page book that they used to throw in front of the house and making a truly ugly drum smoker. So
That's right.
you went from literally an ugly drum smoker, but I'm curious the progression, right? So what was the progression like in terms of the equipment, in terms of the smokers, as you guys started to do more and more of these competitions?
Hey, yeah, I mean, if you see me after a day and never met me, you wouldn't really realize that we got started pretty meager. Well, I mean, we have a nice setup now, and but we're just blessed to have that ability. But we started out with just a couple of homemade smokers, a 10 by 10 pop up, and 2 zero gravity chairs. Actually, our first contest, we slept in the truck. We didn't even have walls on our canopy on our pop up. I mean, that's just how little we started off with, and some fold up tables that we borrowed. And we ran that for a while, and it was on actually we loaded it on a trailer that we borrowed from somebody. So I mean, we didn't have much in it at all when we first got started. We got bit really quick in it, and we just have steadily built up. But really, for the first, I'm going to say 6 to 7 years, we much. I mean, we kind of progressed from a single pop up to 2 pop ups, and then we had walls, and then we tried the air mattress thing, and that wasn't too work. I'm a good bit heavier than my wife, and so she just kind of rolls on top of you, and you're constantly pushing her off of you, using the heats from the drums to keep you warm at night. Sleeping in the vehicles, I'm a pretty large man, so that doesn't work very well for me. I can't hardly move the next morning, so we eventually upgraded after a number of years to a used pull behind camper that I think we bought for like $2,000 or something, gutted it and kind of made a little bit of a nicer area, at least get out of the rain and have some place that was a little bit warmer. And it wasn't until within, I guess, the past 5 years that we've kind of upgraded to a real nice trailer rig that's more of a real nice camper with a cooking area and that kind of thing. So I mean, you can do it, with small investment, and that was actually one of the deals my wife kind of made me do. So I have a bad habit of jumping into hobbies and spending a bunch real quick, and then just kind of dropping it. But so she's like, "Well, if we're going to do this, let's just play with it for a little while before we spend a huge amount of money into this." And that's what we did, and it's worked out.
So I think it's fascinating, and one of the things that continues to come up in a lot of the different guests that are on the show is their humble beginnings. And just the simplicity of it at the beginning, nothing more than some pop-up tents, some zero gravity chairs, a couple of ugly drums. And I point that out because I think it's important for listeners to understand that to get into competition barbecue, sure, you can go out there and spend thousands, tens of, maybe hundreds of thousands if you wanted to, but you don't have to. And I think that's important to just, for those out there that are on that fence about whether or not to do it, I would just encourage them to just simply get into it, start small. Like you talked about, not biting off too much too early. I think maybe Lynn was more responsible for that. But I think it's important that you can absolutely start small. Certainly, yes, does it make things a lot easier and more comfortable if you've got a pull behind or if you've got a fifth wheel or a toy hauler? Of course it does, but you don't need to have that. And so I'm always glad to hear that, especially from teams that are cooking at the level you guys are cooking at and the consistency of it. So bottom line for the listeners, just start, just start and do it.
Yeah, don't be intimidated. And actually, we appreciate what we have more now because of how we started it, and we're always willing to help anybody out. That's just kind of you can kind of spot those that either don't do it very much or just their first contest or two. So we're always, if they're next to us, we're always kind of checking up on them, need anything. if I got it, you can have it. Just let me know. And actually, as we've gotten a little bit older into this, we're kind of going a little bit backwards in some of that in regards to the setup. So this year we've actually cooked on some bar cookers a couple of times because we just didn't want to haul that trailer around everywhere. And so we've literally just borrowed a cooker and had a pop up and stayed at a hotel. And that's something actually that we're going to be doing more of next year and the year after that, just because it's simple and quick for us. And we like being back outdoors. We kind of miss, we're in a trailer right now, and you're kind of hidden a little bit. And I've always had this thing about, I've kind of been my own worst enemy at KCBS. I think being hidden all the time is not doing our organization any good. I think just it's not promoting it well enough. So I definitely want to try to do my part and kind of get back out in the open and have those conversations with people. And every time we've done it this year, and I think we've done it 7 times this year, it's amazing the conversations I have with people who really have no clue of what we're doing. They just saw something, decided to show up and walk around, and they have a lot of questions, and they're really interested in what we're doing, but we have to be available to relay that message to them. And so that's a goal of mine, is to get back into that and start being more open where we're cooking at.
So I'm going to camp out on that for a second, because I'm glad you brought that up. And I think I would agree that, bridging the gap between the patrons of a festival, of an event, and the cook teams, I think is really, really important, especially for the long-term viability of competition barbecue. I think I know that there are teams that just want to focus on the competition, and I totally understand that. And we had Brad Leininger on the show a couple episodes back, and we talked at length about what needs to happen, or some things that need to change to continue to grow the sport, if you will. And I'm curious, just from your perspective, you talked about being outdoors, which I enjoy as well, and you talked about just being available to build those relationships and answer those questions. What else in your mind needs to happen to help bridge that gap between the patrons and these competition cook teams to keep this thing going?
Well, man, I wish I had a really great answer for that. I mean, Brad's really smart at that. He's been doing this for a while, and he looks at it from a totally different perspective than most cook teams, and is very passionate about it and how it moves forward. So I don't know that I have a great answer for how to make it better. I just those things are just observations that I have. It's when I talk to people, family and friends, and then when you go to these events, is that a lot of times they just don't understand what's going on. And I don't know if that's part of it, is getting it out there better. And you are right. I mean, it can be a distraction. And there are times I'm just like, just leave me alone. I'd like to cook, but but it's part of it. And I think in order to keep this thing going and to keep some sort of level of interest in it, and we're going to have to overcome some of these inconveniences and cater a little bit more to the general public and what we're doing and how it's done. I mean, I know there's a lot of ideas out there of how to get people involved into it, more interactive, whether it be from audio, video, kind of a social platform, or whether it just be in person. I don't know the perfect formula for it, but there's got to be something out there. If not, then it does worry me that we're dwindling pretty quickly. And the interest is also dwindling. So we've got to do something to turn it around now and not wait much later.
I really think my amateur rookie observation. So the last 2 competitions, we decided to vend as well. Mm-hmm. And I'll start by saying that, yes, it's a lot of work. And you never stop moving. I don't necessarily think I would do it every competition, but one thing I've observed just by doing that is that you do build that bridge between the patrons and the cook teams, especially like at the last event we did, we were the only team vending. And to your point earlier, a lot of people just don't quite understand what a competition is. They don't understand that teams are just there to turn in 4 boxes.
That's right. That they'll never see.
Correct. And so a lot of folks kept asking me, well, at this last event, they said, you're the only team vending. Why are there no more teams vending? And I think a lot of that goes back to, organizers, just clearly articulating to the patrons, hey, yes, there's a competition, but there's only so many teams that'll be selling barbecue. I know just from like a patron perspective, if I was going to, ABC festival and barbecue competition, I'm pretty much going to expect that I'm going to eat some barbecue,
Right.
And so I think that's just an observation I've had. Like I said, it is a lot of work, but from the economical or the financial standpoint, it's no secret that competition barbecue is not a sound retirement strategy. Uh, so I was trying to think outside the box and look at different ways to potentially, at bare minimum, just break even in terms of the expenses. And I found that could be a way, but also in doing so, I realized, this could be another way to bridge that gap. Although it is no question about it, a big inconvenience, and probably the reason why we didn't do so well at the last competition from a judge's standpoint.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think in the end, it's going to take all parties involved to really make it work. And, whether it's the organizer looking at some kind of interactive shows and demos and things of that nature, which then are going to involve another aspect of the contest, we're going to find somebody that's willing to do something that actually halfway knows what they're talking about. That's not competing, which is going to be rare to find somebody not competing that, to do those type of demos. And I think we've seen glimpses of that with, remember the old Sam's Club events where they used to do a bunch of demos throughout the day. They talked about the contest. We've seen that before with some other organizations that have done some of that type of atmosphere, as well as having organizers understand that, if you only have one barbecue vendor there for, this contest, well, you're putting teams at the spot where they have to, I'm sorry, I can't really give it to you, but I will admit that over the last year or two, I've done a lot more of that where when I've got it, I don't cook a lot of extra anyway, but
right.
What I do have left over, I'm going to catch somebody walking by and say, hey, you want to try a piece, that kind of thing. Because I feel bad. They're just walking around. And you can tell that person. They're just looking, they're just kind of slow walking and looking around. They're kind of scared to come into your site. They're really kind of timid about not wanting to talk to you. So why not just initiate that conversation and just offer them a piece of food and go on about your way. But at least they got a taste of what we're doing, and it's enough to pique their interest.
That's exactly right. And I think it's, barbecue is all about family and relationships, much like a lot of things in life. And, like you mentioned earlier, you're always looking out for those teams that are new and willing to help in any way that you can. And I think that's a big part of the barbecue community, and one part that I thoroughly enjoy myself. So I want to rewind just a second and go back to your beginnings. You talked about the ugly drum smokers. You talked about, taking magnets and all this other stuff. Let's talk about where you are now. So what is give us an idea of your equipment setup now, just in terms of your cookers. What are you cooking on?
Currently this year, what we've been cooking on is we have a cargo trailer that has an enclosed porch, and the front portion of it has more of a living quarter type scenario. It's about 30 foot long. My equipment is I'm cooking on a small 30-gallon gateway drum, and then I'm also cooking on a Southern Q water cooker, and as well I've cooked on some offsets this year as well, like I mentioned. Royal Oak's been sponsoring us for a couple of years now, and so we're exclusively using their charcoal as well for that. And Atlanta Barbecue Store has been really helping us with our rubs, and that's where you got the class out, was through them. So it's a good organization to be a part of. They're a little bit more than just a barbecue store, as you saw at the classes, and they have their own contest coming up. So they really like to give back to the barbecue community and help with that, what we've been talking about as well. So that's typically our setup for right now. And like I said, next year we're going to be doing a little bit more of just a pop-up thing, and kind of just loading up the pickup truck and hooking the cooker up and running down the road. So we'll see how that goes. But we tried it a few times, and I enjoyed it. So a little change of pace.
So how do you and Lynn stay so sharp? Because especially if you're traveling and you're borrowing a cooker that I'm assuming you haven't cooked on, or maybe you've cooked on a few times in the past, How do you guys stay so sharp? Because, each cooker is different, right? There's different hot spots, everything's different. So how is it that I think it's fascinating that you're able to do that.
Yeah, well, actually, so I haven't found a cooker yet that really intimidates me too much, other than doing the full cook on a drum. To me, a drum cooker is a different animal, and you really have to understand direct fire more so than any other cooker, and it can quickly go south on you. So I haven't really gone down that route, and it's a totally different texture and taste, and other cookers can put a little different taste to it, but in the end, it's fire and it's spacing and it's understanding airflow, clean fire versus dirty fire, no matter which cooker it is. I think once you understand how to do a fire, how to control a fire, that then you can really cook in anything. And it's you can spot hot spots in a cooker pretty quick when you put your meat on, and you just adjust. You rotate. You throw some butter spray in there to kind of slow it down a little bit. There's tricks and tips to how to do some of that really doesn't intimidate us. And we've been really lucky. We've had a lot of great friends that have allowed us to do that, because there's actually quite a few contests that we would not have done if that was not the option, was to just drive a truck real light and go 9-10 hours with hauling nothing, and just show up and there's your cooker and you just take it from there, kind of thing. So we've been real lucky with that. And it just goes back to the barbecue community. I mean, these aren't cheap cookers. So somebody just say, hey, yeah, you can come borrow, just come pick it up, or I'll find somebody to deliver it for you. That just speaks volumes to how much people care about anybody involved. It's really barbecue is really like a great commonality among all people. So we all have to eat. We all have this deal where food means something. So no matter what your background, whether it's race, gender, religion, it doesn't really matter. I mean, once you find that common ground, you link up, and you're always going to be linked up. You always have that common item among your conversations there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, let's face it, we started, our ancestors thousands and thousands of years ago were the first ones to start barbecuing. Probably not at this level, but regardless, right, they were cooking over wood and fire. So
yeah, it doesn't matter what you cook on. So I mean, and that's why it goes back to the people, the general public, is that if they're there, they either have some kind of past history or a positive experience in their life about being around a grill, or being with their buddies and things like that, no matter how long ago it was. So they already have this little bit of something that they want to talk to you about. And it's easy to talk with somebody about food and about cooking, and you're not giving away like all your recipes and everything else. It's easy to talk to the average backyard cook in just general terms, and they'll be gaining a lot of knowledge out of it, and really make a connection back to you and the contest and what you're doing there at the contest.
Yeah, I love that. And so if we look out on the horizon, so we're looking at 2023, I know that you said you're going to do more of the pop-ups, more of the borrowing the various cookers and whatnot. How many competitions? Is it going to be around the 40 mark again, do you think?
I don't know. It's if nobody's ever done this, being called a points chaser, and I mean that's what we're doing. There's no hiding that. Right. It's a grind, man. It's a grind like I have never done before, and I have, like I said earlier, I've done a lot of sports, and I've done a lot of 1 a.m., 2 a.m. tournament type stuff, multiple days, but this right here, mentally and physically, is more of a grind than anything I've ever done, and it's beyond just finding decent meat week in and week out. I get that comment a lot of people saying, hey, I don't know how you do this. I can't find meat once a month, much less do it every single weekend. But the planning involved in it, and having really and truly the understanding of what it takes mentally to get through it, because you're gonna face a lot of obstacles. You're gonna have mechanical breakdowns you got to figure out. You're gonna have crappy meat you're gonna have to figure out. You're gonna you still got to work. At least most of
right.
us still have to work, so you're still trying to work around that. And you got family that honestly are there on the losing end. Like a lot of things in this nature, they're the ones your extended family and things, and even your immediate family, they don't see you as much as what they used to. So there's a lot to this. And for me personally, unless we just come right out of the gate and just start knocking them off really quick, I don't see me running that hard again next year. It's just too much to do. That would be my third year in a row doing it. And I need a little break. I need a little break myself.
So you talked about the grind. You compared it to, sports, your background in sports. I'm curious, what is the game? We'll call it game week, but what does game week prep look like for you? What's that timeline look like for you if you're cooking on a Saturday?
Yeah, for us, Sunday, Monday is normally equipment check and doing anything we need to do with regards to cookers and the trailer. We're also at that time, depending on what my week looks like, I don't really have much of a set week because of work schedule. Some days I have to work fairly late into the evenings and into the night, so I'm kind of limited when I get home. But most of Tuesday and Wednesday is pretty much meat day. Man, I'm knocking out meat as fast as I can get it. And but my wife, my partner, she is in charge of all the rubs, injections. She has a checklist. That's the only way to do it. You have a checklist of every single thing you got to have. Everything you need to replenish on that trailer she's already had that already checked off before we got home from the previous contest. So she knows what's got to be loaded up back into that trailer to keep us going. And without that, you would find yourself constantly missing things. I was doing all the rubs and injections and all the meat. It just became too much. I just couldn't keep up, and was just becoming way too much stress for what we're doing. So she took that part over, and I have a hard time even telling you what's in our injections and what rubs we're really using, because she just does it all, and she goes, here, put this on here, put this on here, put this on here. And she does a lot of the rubs herself. So a lot of the wraps, she does all of those. So I couldn't do it without her. The people that do it by themselves, that's the Iron Man of barbecue for sure.
Yeah.
To do all of that by themselves, I don't care how often it is, that's an ordeal.
It absolutely
So
is.
that's our deal. Throughout the week, we're doing mechanical check early. That way we've got a day or two if I need to get somebody to come fix something or get a part. And then we're hitting meat and rubs and things that week. And then a lot of times we're heading out Thursday night late. Because like I said, I work a lot, and especially on Thursday evening. So for us, 8, 9 o'clock leaving out at night, heading to a contest to try to get in 4 or 5 hours of drive time. That's a disadvantage, I think, for anybody in our area, especially if you're not a part of, GBA has a little bit more, but you think about Alabama, Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, these guys don't have a lot of contests in their states. And so for us to travel, it's somewhere between 6 and 8 hours almost anywhere we go. And a lot of times it's further. We've gone as far as 12 this year and done that a couple times this year, just because there's just nothing around us.
So for those, I'm guessing then if someone's looking at this and going, hey, where do I go compete? I'm assuming at some point, maybe you just try to create, a backyard non-sanctioned to get things started in your area. Or like you said, you have to bite the bullet and be willing to travel the 6, 8, 12 hours, whatever it may be.
Yeah, so I think it depends on the person. So it depends on what your goal is and what you're trying to do. If you're not just a straight up just point chaser KCBS guy, well, there's things out there. There's unsanctioned contests. So don't get me wrong, Tennessee has contests, but there's only so many of them that are actually sanctioned. There's probably more of them that are not sanctioned, which is something KCBS might want to look at, is how do you get non-sanctioned events actually to turn over to a sanctioned event. And there's guys now that I know here in Tennessee that used to cook KCBS that do not anymore, really and truly. All they do is run this circuit within the state of these non-sanctioned events. So there's contests out there. It just depends on what you want to do. If you just want to cook every once in a while, there's nothing wrong with them. There's some really great unsanctioned contests out there.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And I think to your point, it really just comes down to taking some time, doing your research, and, cooking. Really, I think cooking any contest to get started, just to get in that, mindset of competing again. And if you're lucky enough to live in a major metro area like, Nashville, or maybe even like Atlanta, where there's probably a sanctioned competition all the time, then that works out well. But, sometimes you do have to just, you know, bite the bullet and make that drive. And for us, I always said to myself, look, I mean, yes, there's some great non-sanctioned contests. There's some great, there's great other sanctioning bodies. But when I look at barbecue competition as a whole, I mean, I want to be in the presence of the best teams in the country. And if that means I need to drive, 4 or 5 hours, then that's the price I'm willing to pay. But I want to compete against the very best, and I know that, I know, at the risk of sounding arrogant, I'm not trying to. I want to compete against the very best there is.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, there's levels to barbecue,
Right.
And you just kind of keep climbing that level. And when you get to a certain level, that's what you're doing. You want to be where the best teams are, just to keep you sharp and to keep pushing yourself as a cook, as a pit master, just to understand your craft even more and keep pushing you to be better. I think the one thing it will do is as if you travel as much as we do, and if you go back and look at our scores, our finishes, we travel all over. We're not really just kind of in one little area. And I think it's made us a better team. We're very consistent in a lot of places that we go. Midwest is a little bit shaky over there, but everywhere else, it seems like we have some really good finishes no matter what time of the year we go and what part of that state we go. And we're proud of that. I mean, and we got that through traveling. So we have tinkered with our profiles that now they work pretty much anywhere we go. And so I think that's what you get out of it if you travel a lot.
Yeah, exactly. You can find that flavor profile that's going to work, whether you're in the Southeast, Southwest, Midwest, doesn't matter. And, likely that's what some of the, top 3, top 5 teams have figured out how to be able to accomplish that. So
yeah, I'll tell you what, though, I think the game is changing, though. And I think, with the availability of knowledge is really changed things from what it was 5 years ago. What it takes to win now versus 5 years ago, or even 3 years ago, really is such a big contrast that I see. And I think where my philosophy of being consistent is an old philosophy in a way, I feel like it may be going away, and I may have to adjust to that. In that, when I'm starting to look at things, if you really want to win, you want to win. There's different levels, like we were talking about. If you want to get calls, you want to win categories, or do you want to win the whole thing? Right. I think it's different thinking in all different levels. And what I have seen in the past, when I was coming up through barbecue, all you hear is you just need to be consistent. Keep it not under and not over. Just kind of consistent all the way across. And in the end of the day, you're going to end up with the GC, right? I think that trend is changing. I really do. I think the teams that are getting the wins are teams that are a little bit more bolder, and they're willing to take the lows and the highs. Where I may be running across the board pretty even, they're going to be down and they're going to be way up. But their ups are number 1 and their downs may be 20 something. And they're willing to live with that in order to get the GCs. And when you start looking at point chasers and team of the year stats, that's what really matters, because these guys are going to guarantee you they're going to cook more than 10. So for them, they'll take a few really low finishes, embarrassing, kind of humbling type experiences to turn around and trade that 3rd place call for a 1st place call the next time. And so for us, we have a lot of 3rds, a lot of 2nds, but not enough 1st. And I've been thinking about this a little bit as I've seen, especially the second half of the year, that when you watch people's scores, they either do great or they don't do as well. And the people like myself that kind of stay more consistent just can't quite pull down that number 1 spot where you get those max points. So it'll be interesting to see how the game changes over the next year or two.
Yeah, that is interesting. I've never heard it explained that way, but now that I think about it, I mean, you're dead on the money there. So, well, as we wind down the show, I want to make sure our listeners know how to follow you and get in touch with you on social media. So you guys are on Facebook, Instagram as well?
Yeah, we're on Instagram, Facebook, personal pages, and barbecue we say all the time, we are the worst at any of that. Honestly, I actually thought about this year, if I could find somebody that wouldn't charge me a bunch just to post stuff for me, because we're just not that good at it. Normally, we're so tired coming back from a contest and driving all night and then having to turn around and kickstart all over again that we're not the best at doing it. But yes, you can find us on any of those social media platforms as well as personal pages.
And for our listeners, again, we're chatting with co-pit master, I guess is the official
That's right.
title.
Exactly
Co-pit
right.
master, Paul Keltner with Rooters-N-Tooters. They're based out of Mount Pleasant, Tennessee. Check them out on Facebook, Instagram. Give them a follow. They're doing great stuff in the barbecue world, and I think currently are one of the top 10 teams in the country, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So a lot to learn. And again, Paul, we appreciate your time and for coming on the show.
No, thanks. Anytime.